Saturday night, Full Gear. Will Mercedes Mone return and keep the TBS title? We're going to talk about it and everything else that happened this week in Black Wrestling on today's WrstlXtra.
Yo, this is WrstlXtra. I'm your boy, A Dazzle, the Black Wrestling Advocate, always joined by my trios team, the Real House of Black Mex, the WrestleManiac, if you will, yeet. And of course, the omnipresent man that is Gerard. Bonner, say his name, he shall appear. Full Gear this Saturday is looking very, very intriguing, very interesting. We're going to talk about some of the matches we expect to see, some of the expectations, the predictions, all the rest of it. But let's start with what Mex started with in the introduction. Of course, Mercedes Mone will face Kris Statlander for the TBS Championship. It's all been going on. Mercedes tried to run her over, tried to get Camille to do something to her, got herself put through the wall last week. Will Mercedes Mone be able to withstand the alien that is Kris Statlander? Gerard, what are your thoughts when going into this one here? As I've said, we've seen all sorts of things from Mercedes trying to derail Statlander, but Statlander's still standing strong. Will she be standing above Mercedes as the new TBS champion come Full Gear on Saturday?
The short answer is likely yes. I have to say, and I'm actually pretty shocked by this, but the reign that she's having right now, that she being Mercedes as a TNT champion at 172 days right now, is the longest championship reign she has had since leaving the WWE. Now, that's actually quite significant if you think about that. Almost 6 months as champion. And it's like, wow. And it's crazy, but obviously she needed to be healthy enough to do that. She had a very short stint as the IWGP Women's Champion. And then, of course, where she was seemingly scheduled to be the inaugural Strong Champion, she got injured and things like that. So I think they're going to stick with her. No offense to Kris Statlander, but I'm not sure she's the one to beat Mercedes. There still has not been any continuity to take her from the alien, as you mentioned, to being a best friend, to not being Willow's best friend, to suddenly being loved again. We don't know really how we got here. And while we appreciate this feat of strength of putting, two women through a wall and nearly avoiding death by not getting hit by an SUV, I don't think that's going to be enough to defeat Mercedes. Whether we like her or not, what she has proven over this 6-month reign is that she actually can wrestle. And we've had a chance to really see that. And she is still head and shoulders above pretty much everybody in the AEW women's division, whether they're fighting for the world championship or the TBS championship. So I think she retains. And I think it's a lesson to the proverbial learning tree for Kris Statlander. Hi, guys.
We've seen Mercedes's run. She's beaten former AEW Women's Champions in Hikaru Shida. She's beaten up and comers, Karina Manata, for example. The names that she has beaten along the way during this reign has been good. But then it's still questioned on how exciting or memorable the reign itself has been. With that being said, would that be enough? Are we in a position where she has to win this in order to feel as though we're getting a better reign or whatever else? Or, with that being said, is it time for this reign to end and give it to someone else? Mex, what are your thoughts on that?
To be honest, I kind of thought that's what Gerard was going down, you know, but I realized that it's my job to be the bad guy, so I'll say it. You know, it's a long time, like we said, the most significant reign of her career in terms of length. But really and truly, what has happened in this reign, you know, this might be one of the highlights, the biggest moments of the reign. In terms of especially stature of people she's faced and stuff like that. So it's been somewhat disappointing. And I would even say, you know, the build has been somewhat disappointing. At times I've been more interested in Camille versus Statlander, which of course, if we get that, you know, it should be a real, you know, meeting of two powerhouses sort of thing. I've recently become more invested in Monet versus Statlander itself, and I feel like, do I let them off the hook because this is really a mid-card title? But at the same time, if we're going to bring in, you know, someone that's meant to be big business, even if it's a mid-card title, you would expect it to be a bit more commanding than it has been. I feel that the build has somewhat been quiet for the names involved in it. Mercedes, I think it needs to continue just to kind of establish her run a bit more. I think it's maybe post Statlander, maybe instead of maybe getting into a story per se with the next person, depending where they want to go for World's End, maybe just a run of TV defenses against like even former AEW women's champions and stuff like that, just to really kind of say, okay, she's beating this person. At least we can say then, you know, 170 odd days, 200 days, she's had X amount of defenses and against these caliber of people before she gets into the next story sort of thing. So yeah, it's been an interesting one. You know, we're going to come on to talk about the NXT women's division and Kalani Jordan. That's obviously dropped her mid-card women's title. Right now, I am kind of thinking along the same path for both of them. Neither have kind of done themselves nothing bad, but nothing to kind of say, I can't wait to see this person as the women's champion. Right. I just don't feel like the run have taken, you know, that step as of yet.
It's true. I mean, I kind of liken it to Bianca Belair's title runs, singles title runs, in the sense where, you know, the in between didn't excite us, but the matches, every single match did.
Yeah,
I think it's very similar with Mercedes, and I don't know what the common denominator is in that, in the sense where, you know, we're kind of struggling with the build up. But the matches are great. We can't discredit the matches at all. You know, but I was gonna say, is it a black woman problem? But at the same time, we've kind of seen that very same thing with a Rhea Ripley, or, you know, even currently with Liv Morgan, possibly even Nia Jax as well, and a few others. Is this a women's wrestling problem, or is it a booking problem? Is it a mixture of the two?
I wouldn't necessarily say it's a women's wrestling problem. I mean, here's the interesting thing. If you mention Rhea, you mention Liv, they were part of some of the most significant stories in WWE for the last year. In some cases, it revolved around the championship, and in other cases, it didn't. I'd say if there's a difference between Mercedes, Kalani, and Bianca in their title runs, it's that of the three of them, Kalani is by far the least experienced. So we have the least amount of expectation for her. Bianca, as she was champion, was starting to come into her own, with us seeing how great of a wrestler she was and how great of a storyteller in ring she was. That was being established. The problem here is, of all of these, none of them called themselves the greatest women's wrestler to ever live, right? So none of them are the highest paid women's wrestler in the business. And none of them, you know, kind of walked into a company and said, I'm here now. I'm about to put this revolution on my back. So I think with Mercedes comes this expectation, like it. Boy, I hate to make this. Ooh. Okay, go with me. It's the equivalent of bringing Vince Russo into WCW, right? Like you look at when they brought Vince Russo into WCW, it was, this is the guy who made WWE great. So we got the secret sauce. We're going to bring him in and WCW is going to be amazing. And they realized that that wasn't the case. And so I think what we're starting to see now with a Mercedes is, sure, you put the big star on the mid-card title, it should automatically elevate the mid-card title. What's happened is we've just gotten accustomed to seeing Mercedes with 2 belts. None of us really care anymore because she's not giving us a reason to care. And so now it makes me wonder, much like a Vince Russo, did Vince Russo become great because there was somebody else guiding that ship? And so is Mercedes great in the environment where somebody else is guiding the ship, or there's another partner that she's dancing with or working with that knows how to accentuate the great things that she does? Because where she is now, I don't know that there's anybody there saying, hey, don't do this. Hey, let's put this and lean into your strength, which happens to be this. It's not happening. So now all of a sudden, you know, where it looked like her and Camille were cool, it looks like they're about to not be cool anymore. And it's like, okay, so why do we care about this? We literally cared more about Camille versus Statlander instead of Mercedes versus Statlander. And now they're going to have this match. And it's like, okay. We were more the match that Mercedes had in AEW that we were the most interested in was her first match, and that was against Willow. And that's because the story had already been told for the last year. We haven't even had a rematch between the two, unfortunately. So what it says to me is neither AEW nor Mercedes has been able to get us excited about other matches involving her and somebody in the company. So I think they both have to bear the brunt for that. I think AEW bears the brunt if they're doing the writing, but Mercedes bears the brunt because she's Mercedes. Like, you come in with all this experience and you say if you're going to come in and change it, then come in and change it. And I have not seen a single change in the women's division since Mercedes Mone has been there.
Very true.
They've had more TV segments or time.
Have they?
I would say they have. I would say
it's still one match
average,
a show.
It might be still one match, but there's more. There's more segments because it's like if she's on the show, at least she has a segment, and then backstage. Maybe another segment backstage or something, and then there's maybe the one match. So if that's a positive and that's positive, then let's give it to them. You know, it's clutching at straws, but it is what it is.
You made a statement earlier that reminded me because I couldn't remember that this actually happened this year. You said she was big business.
Yeah.
Do you remember when she came in? Big business was this year.
Yeah.
That was March.
Yeah.
We've not had big business since she's been there.
We haven't.
So we're at this point, we are 6, 7, 8 months since her arrival. 8 months.
Yep.
You would figure there would have been more. I've seen more of a change with the Hurt Syndicate being present than I have with Mercedes.
That's very true. I mean, my thing is this. So, you know, we talk about Mercedes coming in, being the big star that she is, being all big business, you know, and having the history that she has and all the rest of it. Even bringing in her friend who used to do the stories for her or whatever it was back in WWE and all of that. Peppermint. Do you think that we're kind of putting more? Do we naturally put more pressure on Mercedes than we do anyone else, or is it warranted that we put that pressure on her because of everything involved?
the pressure is on her because, as she has reported, she is the highest paid woman in wrestling.
Correct.
That comes with the pressure. Like if I'm paying you X amount, I'm expecting to see, and obviously for them in an office, they want to see that her segments are doing the best demographic on the show, maybe, or within top 2 or something like that. They probably want to see that return in terms of merchandise, which was reported a couple months ago that they haven't seen that. They are clearly not getting any better in terms of filling arenas. There was a report earlier this week, I think, that in 2025, they've made the conscious decision they're going to try and downsize arenas for Dynamite and stuff, which is, we've all called for it, and it will create a better atmosphere, and it will look good, like, because everything is perception, as we've always said. So, all of these metrics, which you would say that is judged by, and it's not obviously solely down to her, but she hasn't delivered or maybe pulled her weight to help those particular things. So even so much now, we're looking at just on a pure what we see on TV, the TBS Championship she's holding. We're not getting the feels. We're not there yet. Like it's all right, like, but it's nothing special, sort of thing. So yeah, it's just very much like, okay, you gave her the big money and everything like that, but surely you would have wanted certain things, or you expected an upturn in business in certain ways. And they're very quick to report. I just in the industry, whether it's AEW, WWE, when someone is doing great business and when execs are happy with someone and something like that, and we haven't heard anything like that for Mercedes. She just feels like another member of the AEW women's roster.
So does it beg the question, or probably even prove the point that it's not always the person, but the engine driving the person, because she became as big as she was through WWE. Of course, WWE is the engine that it is. The minds behind everything, making the storylines, calling the shots. Whereas in AEW, as we know, there's more space for, performers' creative control and all this kind of stuff. We're hearing, this whole week-to-week booking kind of thing from Tony Khan and all the rest of it. Does that have a bearing on us now not necessarily seeing this big, massive change in the women's division, in the merchandise sales, in the metrics, in the TV ratings, in the whatever? Do you think that makes a difference, the fact that she's in AEW compared to when she was in WWE?
Absolutely. It's the equivalent to the recording artist who's been on a big label and they accomplish all of these things, and for whatever reason they get into a disagreement with the label, they part ways with the label and they become an independent artist. And they quickly realize, oh, snap, there was a marketing arm that did all of that. Holy cow, there was a whole crew of people that went and got me connected to get those interviews where I just showed up. Now I have to do it myself? You mean I have to figure out a graphics person? You mean I've got to figure out how to pay these producers? I didn't have to do that before. You suddenly realize when the large machine is away, how much the large machine did. And what's deceptive about it is the large machine did it without you knowing their names. We don't know all the people who were backstage that made sure those camera shots were great, that designed her merch, that designed her stuff, that made her music, that made those vignettes, that made her look great. We don't know all of those people. But we do know that those people didn't come over from AEW or from WWE to AEW because it's not the same presentation. So I think she's realizing, okay, it's not the same, because it's not. And those things matter. It's the same reason why Jade Cargill, who oddly enough was a huge star in AEW, comes over, and the first thing she recognized was, if this is where I want to go, this is the machine that has the ability to get me there. It's the equivalent of saying, oh boy, you guys are in the UK. Well, no, let's say it's the equivalent of saying, I want to get from London to Vegas, but I'm going to ride my bike to get there. I love your bike, but your bike does not have the ability to go across countries and overseas. You need a different vehicle that has the ability to get you there. So it's not saying anything bad about your bike. Your bike is great for when you want to ride local and maybe you want to do extra exercise and ride an hour or two. But it's not going to get you to another country if you got to fly across water. You need a different vehicle. The vehicle matters.
Can I just throw out there? I wonder what the general perception is. I know obviously the women's roster would be very much like, you know, oh, she's done X, you know, she's main evented WrestleMania and all of this kind of stuff. Rubbed shoulders with these people, got trained by these people. But when you come in like a what's the saying? A big fish in a small pond, so to speak. And then maybe, and your colleagues can feel that, and maybe certain allowances have been made for you to kind of be this person to lift the company somewhat. Is there a point where your colleagues will look at you and be like, nothing's really happening here? Like, we maybe made these allowances, we turned a blind eye to certain things because we were told this might be an upturn in business and XYZ. But she's not doing that. So, you know, it unsettles people or whatever.
I mean, I'm sure there are a number of ladies that have been in AEW from the start. Britt Baker, Hikaru Shida, Penelope Ford, a few others who have seen this happen once or twice. You know what I mean? We've seen it with Mercedes now.
Not at this level, I would say.
Not at this level, but Saraya was another one who kind of came in, did the whole talk of, I'm going to change this, I'm coming with a name and blah, 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 and I'm going to make some changes in the back and all this kind of stuff as well. So, you know, I would love to know how some of those ladies feel. I'm sure there's a level of respect and a bit of honor and all the rest of it, but I guarantee there's a level of frustration. I mean, the men have probably had it more than the women because of the names that have come over the years. Not necessarily coming in with a perception of changing the division because they didn't need to in that respect, but it was still kind of like this whole, oh my gosh, this name's coming, and they've left WWE in order to be bigger stars, you know what I mean, or have their own way or control what they're doing and all this kind of stuff. It just seems to be the ongoing pattern in AEW where people have come over expecting so and so, and it just doesn't happen. And I think for me, the common denominator in all of it is the way AEW is structured. There's nothing else. You can argue it's certain people and egos and blah, blah, blah. But I think at the end of the day, when it really comes down to it, it's just the fact that AEW is run in a very different way. You can argue the negatives and the positives, but it's just that. It's just that. It's as simple as that. You know, we mentioned earlier, like, you know, the amount or the lack of time that women get on the show and all that kind of stuff. And it has changed for the better a little bit, but it's still not significant. You know what I mean? It still doesn't make you stand up and think, oh, yeah, this is happening now. And we're still in the argument of, we're saying all of this about Mercedes and the TBS Championship and her run, but yet that championship still feels more, feels higher up than their main one.
Well, consider this. It's the only women. We're talking about all that's happened for the women. It's the only women's match right now on the card for Full Gear.
Right.
Your world champion is having a championship celebration on pay-per-view.
They easily could have put one of the two matches they've done with Anna Jay, like back-to-back weeks on Collision. Like, why wasn't one of these on pay-per-view?
Right. That one, the hardcore match or whatever that they had.
Yeah, the rubber match they had the other day.
Could easily Full Gear easily because the match was good as well, and it's great that good matches are happening on TV. Yes, it is. Yes. But with Full Gear, literally the following week, we could have just held out. We could have done this celebration on TV, had some kind of fallout, whatever it is, and then have the match on the pay-per-view.
I assume the celebration with Mina, Champagne, maybe Tony Storm returns because I believe she's finished her excursions now. So maybe that's what they're pointing at. But yeah, regardless, I think that's the topic of discussion. We just expect more from Mercedes and don't think she's delivering at this point.
No, not at all. To move on, we're still on the Full Gear, but we're going to see, finally, it's happening. Bobby Lashley versus Swerve. We saw another beatdown last week on Dynamite after Swerve defeated Leo Rush. Has this enhanced the excitement for the match? Has it deferred the excitement? What are your thoughts in terms of how that went down and where we're going to come Full Gear next?
I'm still looking forward to the match. I tend not to like when, in this case, Swerve has come out and said he's got like an injury in his shoulder, right? It's like okay, like it's almost like a inbuilt excuse as to why you're going to lose. Like just lose valiantly. Like I don't like they could have told that story in the match as opposed to putting this tidbit on social media, and it's now like, okay, well, you know, we expected Bobby to win anyway, but it's like now you're excusing yourself as a character, and it maybe takes some shine off Bobby Lashley's win as well. So yeah, I'm not a fan of that personally, but I wanted a strong performance from Bobby Lashley, you know, really take Swerve apart, make us kind of sit at the edge of our seat, like, okay, I don't need it to get, you know, Mox suffocating Danielson uncomfortable, but I would like it to kind of get uncomfortable, you know, just with his bare hands as to, okay, this is a bit much. Like these guys are actually, you know, as their music so wonderfully says, we hurt people.
We hurt people.
So, yeah.
I mean, it's also been said, I think it was something that MVP mentioned, responded to someone on X, about Bobby Lashley not being 100% as well. I mean, again, another one of those things similar to this whole Swerve thing where you don't really want to be told that, you know what I mean? It's not something that you want to know necessarily, unless the injury was like something really serious to where they couldn't perform, then fair enough. But yeah, stuff like that, yeah, it just throws me a little bit. There was something that Bully Ray said, I think it was last week, wasn't this? It was last week, about the whole perception of the Hurt Syndicate and Swerve kind of not being clear. Now, we know that the Hurt Business are the antagonists in this whole thing and all the rest of it. But with the love that they're getting, and then you've got Swerve, who's kind of like, you know, we don't like to use the word, but a tweener in a sense where he's, you know, he's talking about he's the most dangerous guy and blah, 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 but he's the face and da-da-da-da. Gerard, do you think all of that stuff kind of hurts, sorry to use the word, but yeah, hurts the, you know, the whole perception and the storyline? Or do you think it kind of helps in the sense where we're kind of on our toes the whole time and not knowing almost what to expect?
I think the real win is that the fans care. You know, the fans care enough to cheer both guys. That means they're invested in both sides of this, which I think is really, really good, you know, as opposed to not caring at all. So I don't know that it has to be so supremely clear who the antagonist and the protagonist is. You know, we talked about this when Bobby Lashley was establishing the Pride, how he would come out and the people would still cheer him and he'd try to do something dastardly, or the Street Profits would come out and do something dastardly and they still cheer. People love who they love. You know, this, you could make the argument, it goes back to even when the original Four Horsemen were in play and there were people who had the four signs up and they'd come dressed in suits and they'd cheer even when, you know, Flair's breaking Dusty Rhodes' arm, right? So I don't know that we should be as concerned about how the fans are reacting as opposed to whether they're reacting or not. And so it definitely appears that the fans are very excited to see the Hurt Syndicate. And Swerve obviously worked very hard over the last year and a half, 2 years to connect with fans without overly trying to connect with them. And so it's been a very organic rise for both of these sides. I think people are going to be very invested in this match, no matter what happens on Saturday.
Mex, you talked about, you mentioned earlier how the Hurt Syndicate seems to have made more of an impression in just the month and a half, maybe at the most. Since they came in, we've seen them having matches backstage, probably 2 or 3 times on one episode of Dynamite. Max Caster, Anthony Bowens, Leo Rush, Mercedes Mone, so many names, kind of like having interactions with them. We're still waiting for possibly a 4th, maybe a 5th member. Do we see that take place at Full Gear, or does it carry on a little bit longer to kind of keep us, itching?
Yeah, I think we're still gonna wait for this one. I don't think it'll happen as soon as Saturday. Behind the scenes, they may not have even kind of worked out who it's going to be. They may have, and they're waiting for the right time. A scenario where maybe eventually Ricochet gets a shot at Takeshita, and the Hurt Syndicate are the difference in Ricochet winning the title and not. And then he joins them there would be brilliant, because then he joins them and then he's the first one with gold out of all of them, which would be pretty impactful. And then he's got their backing. We still probably want to see a woman in there as well. Is Mercedes too big of a star to be there? I don't know, but I think it could work well for her. Queen Aminata, we mentioned. I think it'll be a fantastic kind of propelling her to consistently being on Dynamite, 1, and then 2, really putting her in front of people to just see how good she is in ring, and even her character. We spoke about how it's almost like a really great fit already. So yeah, I think I think after seeing last week's Dynamite and Collision this week as well, and I think what's going to be on Dynamite this week as well, I think we can probably subtract Will Hobbs. He looks like he's probably going to do his own venture and stuff like that, which I think is the right thing to do for him. Max Caster, I can't see happening. I can't see it happening. And Leo Rush as well, I don't necessarily see that happening. So unless they're bringing someone from outside the company that we're not necessarily considering, my front runners are still for a female, Queen Aminata, and for a male, Ricochet.
Interesting. I mean, we talked about red herrings before, and obviously, with all the names that we've mentioned and all the different interactions that the Hurt Syndicate have had, there's obviously going to be a few red herrings. So I think for me, and I said this last week as well, I think for me the biggest one, and I think it's almost like it would be a repeat of history as well in terms of the Hurt business. I think for me the real red herring, Max Caster, I really think Bowens is going to join, because they did a very similar thing with Ricochet and Cedric with the Hurt business. Yeah, it was Ricochet they were pursuing the whole time, and Cedric was like, nah, not interested, don't do it, blah, blah, blah. And then next thing you know, he turns. I really think, because out of the 2, he fits them way more. Bowens fits it way more than Caster does, and I really think that's going to happen. I do feel as though a 5th member should be a woman. And Queen Aminata is probably top of my list too. But if it's not, I still think there's a chance for Leo Rush. The way he sat back and watched it all play out when the Hurt Syndicate beat up Swerve after their match. I think there's a space for him. Again, we mentioned this last week. He's still kind of, backing to-ing and throwing with Top Flight and those guys. So I think there's space still there. Gerard, can you think of any other names that we may not have mentioned who could possibly join the group?
The only one that really comes to mind is a name we haven't seen in quite some time, and it would finally be something that I think they could sink their teeth into, and that's Ricky Starks. We've not
I
seen
saw that
him.
mention on social media.
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be the perfect way to kind of get back at all things AEW and put him in a very prominent spot, because we haven't seen him since they lost the tag titles, and then, they were in that tournament and he got injured, and we haven't seen him since like February of this year.
Right.
And so I think it would be a great way to bring him back on TV, get him back in the fold, get him in something that, again, is kind of where he left off at in terms of the regularity on TV. That's really the only other name I can think of. I love, obviously, Queen Aminata being in there. Somebody has to, and I think even if you added a Ricky Starks, you still need that member of the faction who's on the come up, who needs the rub and needs to feel the advantage of being part of that group. And that's where I think Queen Aminata would really, really do very, very well in that spot.
For sure. We mentioned the possibility of Ricochet, but moving on to Ricochet in terms of what he's kind of, got his teeth sunk into at the moment. We're going to see him in an 8-man tag match on Dynamite this week with Will Hobbs, Ospreay, and I forget his name.
Mark Davis.
Mark Davis. That's the one. Against, of course, the Don Callis family. Where are we going with this? Because we know that we're going to get Will Ospreay and Carl Fletcher. Ricochet's been breathing down the neck of Takeshita. We've had nothing solidified in terms of a one-on-one with those two. And we're seeing some kind of confusion, I guess, from Mark Davis as well. How does this play out on Wednesday, Mex?
I haven't thought about who would win this match. However, when we do get the eventual Takeshita Ricochet match, I think Takeshita retains, unless Ricochet has got a certain syndicate with watching his back. True. I think Ricochet will not win that match. I think Takeshita will retain. I think Takeshita's probably going to go into the Continental Classic with the title, which I believe starts in a week or so. And yeah, I think we're aiming for Okada versus Takeshita, but maybe all belts are going to be on the line. I think that's the direction we're heading in post Continental Classic. Whether they plan to unify it or whatever, I don't know. So yeah, I think I'm not too sure what we do with Ricochet post this match or post losing to Takeshita. He can continue to put on great matches. I don't know.
I mean, he's been putting on great matches. He's been doing good work and all the rest of it. But I feel if he does lose, do you feel if he does lose this, it hurts his run, or it just
loses the tag match?
No. If he if he faces Takeshita, or is it just a thing where he's lost, but it's Takeshita, so let's not make a big deal out of it?
Go on.
No, I was going to say I think we have to make a big deal out of it, because the whole idea of Ricochet, in his words, coming over from WWE was to get himself in the conversation that he didn't feel like he was being elevated in over in WWE, which means you now have to be fighting for championships and you have to win those championships. You have to be in those kinds of matches. And so, he didn't beat Ospreay in their battle for the international championship. And that was because of Takeshita. If you get into a space where you're fighting Takeshita and you don't win the championship, here again is where someone's own words cause them to have the smoke. Like, because of what he has said, it's now put an expectation of us on him, which is to say, okay, if you're saying that you were starting kind of over again in WWE because they were putting you up against Braun Breaker and Ilya, and you want to see yourself higher, well, then you have to prove to us now that you're over here, that's not the issue, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So I think he kind of has to win this match to not get the kind of smoke. So if he can't do it by himself, he should connect with the Hurt Syndicate to be able to prove, yeah, I can win the championship and be in these conversations again. And maybe this is related and unrelated. This perhaps should be why maybe there should be either a PR team in place for these interviews or more care taken for these interviews, because these people are just saying random flippant things, and now it is causing us to have an expectation of them that they're not going to want us to have.
What I'll just add on to that, you asked a question, Dazzle, about, you know, our views of Ricochet if he loses to Takeshita when they have that match. For me personally, nothing. But if he loses to Takeshita, then say has a run in the Continental Classic, but eventually doesn't win, and then on 5th of January he faces ZSJ for the IWGP title, and more than likely will not win, then we're at the point of, okay, you're being given these chances and you're not winning. So all of a sudden, yes, the expectation, the noise you've made about coming over to AEW and not being seen as a newbie in WWE, well, come on, you have to kind of deliver on something. Your character, whatever, has to deliver on something now. So you can't have, say 2 to 3 opportunities at a title in the next 2 to 3 months and lose them all. So yeah, Ricochet is it's not going to look like, some out of this world stat if that happens.
It won't be out of this world. We saw a now deleted rant from Ricochet last week, late part of last week. And even with, I kind of rewatched some of the interview that he had with Chris Van Vliet a couple of weeks back as well. And a lot of it, obviously is his reaction to, people tweeting and saying stuff and all the different things that he gets on social media and whatnot. Do you think he is too concerned about that stuff, or is it the fact that he's getting too much attention and too much, being nagged at, I guess, maybe, by social media world?
I'll just say, so Samantha came out and said that the rant was fake. It was the tweets weren't real. Yes, that's what was said anyway. What I will say is, though, it wasn't AI that was sitting in front of Chris Van Vliet, and like yourself, right? You can see he has a bee in his bonnet. You can see he has a chip on his shoulder, and he wants to prove something and shut up these people. Yes, I would say he's far too concerned with what the internet have to say about him. Just go out there and do the work, sort of thing. The likes of, say, your close friend Will Ospreay had to face, he's nothing but a gymnast, flippy this, flippy that, blah, blah, blah. The guy turned himself into an IWGP world champion. He turned himself into hot property, came to AEW with so much fanfare, was Tony Khan's special project and new toy before he turned up in AEW. We had to make sure our current world champion at the time, Swerve Strickland, beat this man so that all of us could sit down and rest that he wasn't going to win this title in England. So this is the kind of stuff Ricochet is focusing, in my opinion, on the wrong things. We all want the best for him, but like you say, you're making your bed in a certain way. If things don't plan out, you're gonna have to lie in that bed the way you're making it. Right. So, I think just kind of focus on what's important. You're a superstar, you're a TV star at this point, wrestling star. Like it comes with it. People are going to criticize, people are going to talk. How you're handling it right now, I don't know. I can't say I approve of it.
Gerard, do you feel as though he does get more attention or from the social media world, or is that almost kind of like on the back of him reacting as often as he does? Does he get worse because of that, or is it simply that he just does get, for whatever reason, more attention on social media than most of us do?
I think when the attention that you gets amplified the more attention you give it, and I think because he has given it so much attention, I think that's where that comes from, because it's not the attention of winning championships. It's not the attention, these things either come off the back of him responding to something or an interview that he's done. And I think this is one of the frustrations that can happen whenever you're in the public light. How much of this stuff do you respond to, and how much do you just let it fly off your back? People can never misquote you if you didn't say anything in the first place. And I think that's where he has got to be careful. I know to a degree that probably more than any other company, WWE does start to inform their people of how to conduct themselves on social media and things of that nature. When you leave that space, people kind of feel like, oh, wow, I'm free. I can say whatever I want to say. Well, I think there's still wisdom in that. You've got thousands and thousands of followers, and we know in the IWC, everybody's got liquid courage. Everybody feels like they can say whatever they want to whomever they want. You have to pick and choose how and when you respond. And to me, the best way to respond is to go in and have amazing matches. Go win championships, go prove the people wrong that way, instead of getting into these one-on-one Twitter wars.
Very true. Very true. Moving away from AEW, let's turn our attentions back to WWE. We're seeing the Women's United States Championship tournament has begun, and we saw BFAB in her match. Gerard, just tell me about that match, how you think it went for BFAB. Of course, she didn't win, but some people have come away encouraged, and she herself definitely was very, very much encouraged. She did a bit of a message on the socials following the match. How do you feel about BFAB's performance, and what could possibly happen for her moving forward?
So for those who missed it, it was a triple threat match to in the first round of the U.S. Championship, the Women's Championship. It was a triple threat, Bayley, Candice LeRae, and BFAB. And most of us didn't find out that it would be that pairing or that trio until that night. And so I think some may have been surprised that BFAB was even included in this. But to me, it was a clear indication that BFAB has something to present. And so I'm not sure if there was a part of me that felt like it would have been great to see her win. Not necessarily to win the championship, but to win the first round match in an attempt to show, hey, we're going to give new faces an opportunity at this championship. But what it did was it showed that she can hang in there with two veterans like Bayley and Candice LeRae. She looked fantastic in the ring. Easily the best showing she's had by far. It shows that she's been doing the work behind the scenes and now deserves to be seen, not just as, the fourth member of Hit Row, not just as the third member of the Street Profits, but as her own standing entity who can make an impact in the women's division. So I thought it was a great showing on the USA Network in a great match. She had great time in the ring, performed all of her moves well. She didn't have what people would call botches. She looked very smooth and comfortable, seemed to know her body and how to use it well as an offensive weapon. It was a great showing for BFAB. And I think people can really get behind that. And I think we're seeing, as she continues, the making of a potential star.
Max, do you see what do you see for BFAB moving forward? We've got the women's division, we've got this new title, all the rest of it. It may feel as though there's too much going on in the women's division for her to be another new star, but is that possible? How long will it take? Is it something around the corner, or something in a few, maybe a bit longer?
Wrestling is one of them things where we always just look at, timing. Like, things can happen for you, like if the time is right. All it takes is, say, God forbid, but a few key injuries up and down the roster, and all of a sudden they're asking you to wrestle every week, at the very least, on TV. So, she has a long way to go. I think I mentioned, during the week when the US title was announced, Michin was here doing dances and TikTok because he's just happy that another opportunity has arose for the women and for herself. Right. So there's still a queue of people that is going to stand in that way of that title, and there's still a queue of people just looking for an opportunity to get on TV. It's only been a matter of weeks since we saw a Tegan Knox, Indy Hartwell lose their jobs because there's nothing for them. So, this is the first great step on the ladder. It was said, when was it? The top of this month when WWE were in the UK. She wrestled in London. She wrestled in Nottingham as well. And people walked away from that. People I spoke to that went to those shows said that she was surprisingly good in those shows. And obviously those are live events where, she probably has more freedom to do whatever she wants to, sort of thing. And people came away from those and had big praise for her. So without doubt, that is what's got her the opportunity to be on TV. That's probably the proving ground somewhat. Because she hasn't wrestled any house show or anything like that since when I checked between then and now. When she got this opportunity. So they've remembered the impact she made at the beginning of November and given her this opportunity here. And hopefully, the opportunities keep coming. Even if it's, she works her way into a number one contender for the new US champion and, falls there at that hurdle or whatever. Wrestling's a game of repetition. It's a game of, getting the experience in. In terms of the presentation, aura, like I've seen it reposted many a time. People enjoyed the entrance and all of that kind of stuff. So, they're on board for that side of things. And people were, like Gerard said, they saw a match which she got in a lot of stuff, no major botches or mistakes or anything like that. So it's only up from here. She might have to, be a bit patient, take that approach and wait her turn, or she can go in, kick the door down, cause a ruckus, and accelerate her journey. But it's just good to see another person, another black woman get an opportunity, take it with both hands. No one's saying, I haven't seen one person say she was out of place, she didn't belong, SmackDown was too big a stage for her. It's all been pleasantly surprised. She was good, and that showing was good. So yeah, congrats to her on that main roster debut.
For sure. The one person who is very high on everyone's favorites list to become that first United States Women's Champion is Naomi, of course. We saw her on SmackDown last week fight for the Women's Championship against Nia Jax. Does she move into this whole thing of becoming the United States Women's Champion, or does she stay within the space that she's in now with Nia Jax? Because that match was interrupted. So she could still have, an argument to say, well, match was interrupted, blah, blah, blah. I want another shot. I'm still here, and all the rest of it. Or would it be better for Naomi to move into this United States Championship space and go for that? Gerard, what are your thoughts on which title should she actually go for?
I think going for the US title is the real win here for a few reasons. One, you get to establish the championship's legacy. There may be many other champions, but there'll only be one first. And I think she gets the opportunity to do that, as opposed to trying to beat the legacy of Nia Jax, who is still very much on a great roll that she's been on all year. I think this is a separate lane that's carved that ironically does not look any less than the WWE Women's Championship at this point. Because it's a new title, because it's something people have clamored for, and because there are a lot of women who are in the conversation for it, her winning doesn't look like a step down. And I think that's what's really important. You know, this is not a championship that's only going to be seen on house shows, or a championship that, you know, is exclusive to X or Facebook or something. This is going to be something that will be on television. She'll likely be doing media because of the US Championship, and, you know, who knows whatever else will come from it. So I think for her, and couple that, which we'll get to, she is very much in high profile spaces these days. So it would be a good look for that US Championship and for her to be able to come together. So definitely, I think that's the move for her to make.
For sure. Speaking of the interruption in that match and how it all played out, we're now seeing it's been made official yesterday. The Women's War Games match, of course, that will include the Women's Tag Team Champions Bianca Belair, Jade Cargill, Naomi as well, Io Sky, and of course the surprise involvement of Rhea Ripley, who was supposed to be out for months and come back within weeks. Clearly not 100%. She's got the whole Cody face mask going on. I don't know how I feel about that, but we're getting this Women's War Games. On the other side, we've got Nia Jax, Liv Morgan, the two women's champions of the WWE at the moment. The Women's Money in the Bank holder, Tiffany Stratton, the WWE Women's Speed Champion, Candice LeRae, and then, of course, another former champion in Raquel Rodriguez. It's a star-studded 10-woman battle that we're going to see. It's been argued. Well, it's not necessarily an argument, but I guess a bit more of a fact. There's a lot less character dynamics, or, you know, compared to the whole bloodline situation and all the rest of it. A few weeks ago, I even saw people making mention on social media of WWE not caring about a women's War Games match. Some people even thinking it wasn't even going to happen. Has this been done the right way? Are the right women involved? Are we excited for what can happen in this match mix?
No, it hasn't been done the right way. We've got like the likes of a Bianca Belair, who has recently went to war with Io Sky on a few occasions. Could say it's just, you know, what's the words? Just competitive matches that they're having or whatever, no real beef. But Bianca Belair, even up to last week on SmackDown, is still holding grudges against Bayley for Damage Control stuff. Hello, Io Sky was also in Damage Control. So that doesn't necessarily make sense. There's a whole host of stuff that's obviously just dragged people in to be involved and that kind of stuff. Like, the funny thing is, this match, I'll bet money this match will be better than the Bloodline match. Yep. Like, this match is going to be the War Games match of the weekend when it happens, right? But the build is like, we're getting back into the territory of Survivor Series War Games. We must have a War Games match. No, you don't. The men, okay, cool, because of what we're seeing with two, you know, like sides of the family clashing. The women don't need this. The women don't need this at all. Like, they have their individual feuds and stuff going on. We don't need to put them in a War Games situation. Like, this is what we were doing and said this was a Vince thing with just having Hell in a Cell matches willy-nilly 3 times a year and all of this kind of stuff. Like, this is no different to that. So, I mean, I would really like them, as of next year at this point, to kind of step away from the idea of War Games has to happen in November at Survivor Series. Like, use it on the occasion that it's needed, as opposed to shoehorning it and making the whole pay-per-view around it. Because although the women are going to have a fantastic match, and like I said, I'm very confident it'll be better than the men's, because the women always show out when they get these big opportunities and big stipulation matches. It's just, we don't need, these guys don't need to be in a War Games match. Simple as.
Gerard?
I respectfully disagree. I think if you look at the history of War Games, the matches haven't always been full-on 5-on-5 warfare with everybody just hating everybody. There have been moments where it has been this mixture. I mean, even if you look at last year, last year's War Games that had the Judgment Day on one side, and they grabbed the fifth member. The fifth member was Drew McIntyre, which doesn't make sense, except for Drew McIntyre just wanted one opportunity to have Jey Uso on the other side of the ring. So, and then we didn't even talk about how Randy Orton got in there, but Orton got in there very last minute, So I think there's room for that. Granted, War Games is something that's only going to happen once a year, that is going to involve a team environment. And what I think is special about this one, it's wild. So we may not have liked how we got to the women's one. The men's one we saw coming all the way at WrestleMania. Like when Roman lost, we all saw, okay, it's going to be Bloodline versus Bloodline at War Games. We saw that coming. We've enjoyed the ride to get there. We didn't know what the women's one would look like. And part of the reason you didn't was because you didn't have a full-on damage control. You didn't have a full-on women's faction that was so dominant that was destroying everybody everywhere. So in a strange way, the War Games match for the women feels like how the traditional Survivor Series teams were put together. And so it's a throwback to that in that regard inside of a War Game space. Now, the 10 women that they have, you have an amazing amount of actual War Games experience with those women in that match, which is what's going to make this incredible. Io Sky had to be involved because she's just been the star of women's War Games. Bianca and Rhea on the same team again, massive, absolutely massive. We've seen Raquel inside of a War Games, which is great. I think it's going to be fun to see what Nia can do in that space, what Liv can do in that space, and what Jade Cargill. This is arguably the biggest match in Jade Cargill's career. This is a very high-profile match. And how about Naomi getting to be in this marquee match? So there are definitely some wins that are happening here. It may not have had the cinema of the Bloodline, but I think it does have that ode to what made Survivor Series great ever since 1987. People coming together for a common cause. It's interesting because, granted, I know we had just a couple of weeks ago Liv and Nia Jax fighting each other for that, crown jewel championship. I actually enjoyed the promo that Nia did that kind of helped make that make sense.
Right.
I think timing wise, what might have been tough was it was just like, here comes Rhea, here they come. She says War Games, here we are. Right. And I think it's just a timing issue. That's what happens when you've got a week and a half. But I'd rather that team than some other, because I think if they had grabbed 10 other women at this point, we wouldn't nearly be as excited and as enthralled for it. I think it's going to be great. It's going to work. Sometimes we don't always get the cinematic lead up to a match we'd like, but boy, this match is going to cook.
Yeah, for sure.
Can I just say, to everything you've just said, there's no reason why this just can't be a traditional 5-on-5 then. and then that's the ode to Survivor Series. Why are we putting them in a War Games match?
Because War Games is far more of a spectacle than the old 5-on-5 elimination.
We've got one with the men. We've got one with the men.
No. Here's where we welcome to 2024. If you do not have a women's War Games match and you only have a men's War Games match, did we not forget what we just came out of with somebody randomly asking Triple H, hey, why hasn't there been a single male black superstar on a pay-per-view in 2 years? We don't want that smoke. And not just that, but I think these women are capable of carrying it. I think there's a difference between the War Games match and the Hell in a Cell. And I think we're equating the two as similar. Hell in the Cell is now the new school cage match where once you get in here, it's over. Not the case with War Games. Think about this. The bloodline is still well. Here's why it isn't. Because after War Games in 2022, then we still had all the bloodline fighting. And then that turned into, the Usos and Sammy and Kevin main eventing night 1 at WrestleMania 39. And we're still having bloodline stuff 2 years later. So I don't think it has to be the blow off. I think just like the 5-on-5 elimination was the deal in the early iterations of Survivor Series, War Games is where we are for Survivor Series these days. If this were 5 or 6 years ago, it'd be Raw versus SmackDown, and there wouldn't necessarily, people used to get mad about that. Like, well, the brand split isn't really happening because occasionally we see them. It's okay. It's the time of year. It's like putting the Christmas tree up, right? We may not have the greatest lead into why you got the gifts, but golly, it's close to December 25th. We're putting Christmas trees up. We're putting Christmas music on. 'Tis the season to be jolly. It's Survivor Series War Game season. That's where we are. That's
they should hire you for their PR.
Just like when we get to the top, when we get to the top of the year, we're going to be in the Royal Rumble. It may not make sense how we get there, but we're on the road to WrestleMania. It's that time of the year.
Right. And I was going to say, you know what? I think for me, with how the women's one has kind of worked out, I think it's kind of in between the traditional way and the new school way. And I think that's kind of what's probably confused people in a way where, we're very used to, and as you said, Gerard, we've known about the possibility of the bloodline civil war since WrestleMania and since early part of this year, and we've been waiting through it, seeing the cogs turning and small things happening here and there, knowing that we're going to eventually get to this. With the women's one, it's not been like that at all, and I don't think it was possible. Maybe down to injuries, maybe down to what's been going on and all the rest of it. And I think that part is what's maybe upset people, because we've now become used to that long-term thing, or having to see, a few Easter eggs thrown in throughout the year up until now. Whereas this has happened, as you said, like in the last week, 2 weeks. Whereas in the past, you'd have two people feuding and Survivor Series is on the way. And then someone says, well, Survivor Series is on the way, so your team so-and-so, your team so-and-so, find 4 people to be part of your team. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And it worked out like that. I think this is kind of like the in-between to where, it's all happening, but some of the stories fit. Some of them don't make complete sense, but you can make sense of it. But it's not all the way, but we're still going to have a good match. You know what I mean? So for me, I was kind of in this space of, okay, how, maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago, what is this women's War Games going to be? Are they even going to have one? But I think with the way it's worked out, I can't think of any better way or even better participants in the match itself. Maybe would have swapped an Io Sky for a Bailey in terms of stories and all of that and the dynamics and what could have happened with that. Because even with the whole thing with Bianca and Bailey and all of that stuff there, it would have added to the dynamic of, oh, So these two have to kind of work together and blah, blah. And maybe there's going to be something that happens in the match to further some kind of story for them later on. But then, like you said, you can't leave out Io Sky. Mm-hmm. I mean, I remember I rewatched highlights from her match against Penta back in Lucha Underground.
Yes.
Oh, my word. Woo. That was madness. So I'm just like, okay, I see why she does all that mad stuff in these War Games matches and feels so comfortable doing it. And it's always her that they call on to do this kind of stuff. Candice LeRae's kind of like, what is she doing there? But it's like, obviously, she's formed a partnership with Nia Jax, and it makes sense. Mm-hmm. So it kind of all makes sense. It's very, very much star-studded, as I said. You know, almost every single one of them hold a championship or are number one contenders to a championship or are former champions. I can't think of a better way it could have been done unless it was fought out for months and months and whatnot. It definitely feels as though it's something that's kind of happened, you know, very relatively recently, which in a way is unfortunate, but at the same time, I don't think it necessarily hinders the match or you know, making sense of any of it at all. But we are where we are, and I think it's going to be interesting to see how it all plays out and who comes out on top. I don't think anyone loses out. Whoever loses, I don't think anyone loses out. I think we're just going to get a great match, and we'll further storylines afterwards and carry on with life. We'll still have Rhea and Liv going at it for probably the next 10 years, like Adam Cole,
right.
Adam Cole and MJF. Like, you know what I mean? Yes. It's just one of those things. It's one of those things. It's never ending for a while. To talk really quickly. We're still talking about the women, but this is probably our favorite topic on this show, the NXT Women's Division, of course. We saw the Meta Girls take on Stephanie Vaquer and Julia, and unfortunately they lost. I think that's what we expected, but great showing from those ladies. But what's happening now is Jada Parker is set to take on Stephanie Vaquer. What does this do for Jada Parker? I mean, I'm sure neither of us expect Parker to come away with the win. Vaquer is on a tirade right now. She's unbeaten since coming to NXT. We're expecting her to be the next NXT Women's Champion, eventually dethrone Roxanne Perez. But for Jada Parker to be another person in this position to go against this woman who's already, you know, we're already expecting great things from. Gerard, what does this do for Jada herself?
When I saw the announcement about this match, my heart literally went because I fully expected both of them to be in the Iron Survivor match. So them having a match is like, wait, what? So I it's hard to call because I'm sure there are those who are like Stephanie Vaquer is the odds-on favorite, but we've seen scenarios where odds-on favorites in these kinds of scenarios lose. What this does for Jada Parker, I think it just continues to show how high her star has risen. I mean, to be put in a one-on-one match against Stephanie Vaquer is crazy to me. And she's going to hold her own too. She's going to hold her own. So there's a lot of ways this thing could go tonight. I'm still in shock that this match is actually happening and we're getting it on free TV. Like what in the world? What in the world? This is going to be special. I don't want to call a winner on this because I don't want to go against Jada Parker. Even though, you know, Stephanie Vaquer is an odds-on favorite, if she gets hit with that hypnotic,
listen,
that hypnotic broke a ladder. You hear me? Broke a ladder.
This is true.
Songwriter said the hips don't lie. They don't lie. They don't lie. They got power. They got power. Yeah.
I mean, we've talked about a lot, you know, we talked a lot today about red herrings and things being thrown in and deceiving us and all this kind of stuff. We saw an interaction after Vaquer and Julia won the tag team match last week. Both of them talking about being in, seeing each other in the Iron Survivor match. Mm-hmm. But we've also seen Vaquera's pinned Roxanne Perez. She has a legit reason to not even have to be in the Iron Survivor match in order to face Roxanne. But we've also seen the same thing for Zarya as well. Mm-hmm. She's pinned. So there's a chance that Jada Parker wins this match and goes to Iron Survivor.
Yes.
And it doesn't harm Vaquera going for Roxanne. Mex, is that possible?
Don't sell yourself the dream, guys.
the dream pillar, Mex.
The dream is sold separately. Don't sell yourself the dream. To Gerald's point, when we saw this in our Wrestling's Discord chat, literally there's a collective groan and a sigh, because it's like, this is brilliant for Jada Parker. You want to see her progress, but she's met this wall called Stephanie Vaquer that more than likely she's not going to beat. I'm happy with Jada not being in this match, to be fair. The division is so star-studded right now. So, going and having the outing is all cool, but when she's in it, I want her to be a real person that we're sitting here and saying, Jada Parker might win this and become the number one contender for the women's title. And she's probably at least, this next year off doing that. By the time it comes around next year and she's in that match, we may be looking at someone that very well might be a contender for that women's title. So it's a great spot. It's probably just come a bit too early in that respect. But with Stephanie Vaquer and the Roxanne situation, you were talking about red herrings. I think the red herring is that if Stephanie Vaquer goes all the way, wins the match, the Iron Survivor match, she loses to Roxanne before eventually beating Roxanne for the title. But I think in the first instance, she might actually lose to Roxanne. So at least Roxanne's got her win back, so to speak.
I kind of feel as though, because I mentioned Zarya as well, I kind of feel as though Roxanne's next opponent is Zarya. She's going to beat her. So then she'll have beaten Julia, Zarya, but I think it's going to be Steffi that actually beats her.
That makes sense as well. Yeah,
I think that is where we're going with all of this. I have no idea whether Zarya's having a qualifying match for the Iron Survivor, but at the same time, I kind of see it playing out that way.
Yeah, it depends how long. If they want Vaquer to win the title at Stand and Deliver, then we've got time to play with. We've got till mid-April to play with. So in my scenario, she can beat Stephanie. Stephanie can build herself back up and then win at Stand and Deliver. Same way in your scenario, she can have Zarya maybe in the new year or something like that. And then the next challenge is Vaquer at Stand and Deliver. She wins there if Stand and Deliver is like the overall destination.
Again, with this division, there are so many different ways it can go. But going back to Jada Parker, I feel that you're correct in terms of it kind of feeling too early. I think we're probably going off the back of her beating Lola Vice, of course, and hoping for her to go on, a bit of a win streak and all that kind of thing. But I think for me, the destination for her should be the Women's North American Championship and not the NXT Women's Championship. So I would have no issue with her not being in this match, in the Iron Survivor match, and her, pursuing Fallon Henley in the near future if she's not the first or the next one to face her. So I'm not upset with her losing and to Vaquer and all the rest of it tonight, but I don't think it hinders her. Just as long as she has a good showing in this match, I think we're good to go. Shout out to Sol Ruka as well, who also has already qualified, beating Cora Jade, which actually was a bit of a surprise to me as well, in terms of the position Cora Jade has come back in and all that kind of thing. So that was nice to see. That says a lot. I don't know what that does for Cora, but we're here. But yeah, also to the last thing I want to talk about really quickly, the two men that have qualified already as well, Wesley and Javon Evans, have qualified for the Iron Survivor match already. Both very much convincing wins. Both had great battles against their respective opponents. Who joins them in the match? I don't know about all the other qualifying matches yet in terms of who's in the matches, but who joins them? And can any of those two guys actually come out as the winner?
As the winner, I mean, I don't know how invested I am in this match, to be honest, just because I think we know Trick is probably having some kind of lengthy run. You know, this is Trick's run sort of thing. So you would expect whoever comes out to maybe not beat Trick whenever they have the match, I would say. But I think you could have a good time with these guys, with Wesley and Javon Evans in this match. We saw the kind of flurry that Trick himself had, you know, towards the end of last year's one, where he just went absolutely Super Saiyan for the last few minutes, just got loads of pins. So I think you could see something with that, with the athleticism of these two guys. Yeah, it's definitely right. But they're in the right place. This is where they both need to be. Wesley for sure needs to be, you know, going towards that top of the card. Javon Evans is just a massive talent at this point, so you want to include him in, you know, an innovative match like this. But like you said, there's still 4 more places to kind of establish before we can really see, you know, who could come out and win it.
Gerard, any thoughts on who else is supposed to be possibly in this match, and whether either Wesley or Javon can come out on top?
So there is another men's qualifying match tonight. Nathan Fraser and Eddie Thorpe. That's happening tonight, which should be interesting.
That should be a good match.
It should be really good. Obviously, on the women's side, it's Stephanie Vicor and Jada Parker, and also Zaria and Ren Sinclair. So on the women's side, we could find ourselves getting very close to almost everyone on one side of that 10-woman tag at NXT 2300 in that match. Which
yeah. Outrageous.
Absolutely outrageous. I mean, the idea of Zaria and Julia and Vicor all together, Sol Ruka and some crazy 5th competitor. God forbid Jordan Grace finds herself in there, which would be nuts. So the men's one is interesting. I mean, with the possibility of Eddie Thorpe and Nathan Fraser. I wonder who else could find their way in there. I'm very surprised that we have not heard Obafemi's name at all since Halloween Havoc. And I don't know. I mean, if this is a great place to bring him back, you know, a great place to bring him back, to put him in this kind of a match. It seems like a toss-up. And what's so wild to me is the NXT men's division and getting into this match almost feels like what Mex was describing for how we got to the women's War Games match.
True.
You know, it's hard to predict. It's hard to see who you could grab and put in there. And it is an interesting question, who wins and who ends up challenging Trick. I don't know how long this reign is supposed to be. It's felt like the reign has been going on almost all year, and it hasn't. But I think it's just been the anticipation of it. So this is a toss-up. But I do think that no matter who else ends up in this, that either Wesley or Javon Evans comes out as your winner.
I feel that too. I feel as though it could be one of those two. I think I would rather it be Wesley.
Me too.
Only based on 2 things. One, him being, you know, the heel and the traditional thing of the heel versus the face being Trick Williams, the champion. When we eventually get to that. The other part is, for me, is Javon Evans having so many opportunities and coming up short. It's great he's having the opportunities. It says a lot about him having the opportunities, but for him to have as many and lose as many isn't necessarily damaging to him. He's still very young. He's got so much time, but I just want to see him excel without it being opportunity after opportunity after opportunity. More so, have a great feud with someone, have a decent storyline, build him up to that instead of being thrown into number one contender matches or tag team title matches and not winning and blah, blah, and you know what I mean? So for him to win Iron Survivor and then go on to face Trick, and we expect him to lose because Trick's going to have a lengthy reign, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, I don't want to see that again. So I'd rather, out of the two, I'd rather see Wesley win to then lose. I don't want to see Wesley lose, but you know what I mean?
This is a problem with the division.
Yeah.
That we have to include a 20-year-old in something like this. Now, of course, talent will say that, you know, he should be there anyway, which is fair enough. But really and truly, he shouldn't maybe be here if we had a fully fledged, if we had a men's division like the women's division, you know, he shouldn't be making it here. Unless, you know, which he practically is, that kind of rare, super young talent like Roxanne is. But yeah, really and truly, he shouldn't be in this position. He should be doing the rounds on NXT and stuff like that. We shouldn't have to be thrusting him in. But because we can trust him, because he's excellent in the ring, because he has that prior experience, he's being thrusted into these positions because he deserves it and stuff. But he's losing because it's almost like you're not ready yet. We just need to put this guy over or whatever. So it's like a punishment of his own success and his own, you know, how good he is, sort of thing. Like I say, talent will always kind of rise to the top, sort of thing. But if we had like a fully fledged division, take for instance on the main roster, you know, we're not shooting Bron Breakker to the world title because there's a queue, there's people there, there's a built up division. We know Austin Theory has had to take a back seat, but we know he's a super talented, you know, young guy. Carmelo Hayes is still waiting for his opportunity because there's a queue. Like NXT, there is no queue. Like the 20-year-olds are getting opportunities. So it's a blessing and a curse, sort of thing. But you know, like you said, it's not too damaging, even if he does get that opportunity. He am I right in thinking he's already had a title opportunity at Trick?
Well, it was a multi-man match. That was the night that Ethan Page won the title.
Page won. Yeah. And he's had at least 2 number one contender matches. Another one that was one of the last ones was again another triple threat. Obviously he had the whole tag team title opportunity as well with Cedric. And yeah, I mean, even him versus Randy Orton felt like it was some kind of, you know, title opportunity because of the stature of Randy Orton, of course. You know what I mean? So it's just one of those things, and you knew he wasn't going to win. And I think every time, apart from maybe the triple threat match for the NXT Championship, I think that was probably the only time I felt as though he could have won. But that was more so during the match and not necessarily before it. You know what I mean? But yeah, it's as you said, Max, you know, it's a bit of a blessing and a curse in terms of how good he is. And it's not to say that he doesn't deserve to be here because of his talent, but at the same time, there are still a few, branches that need to be cut in order to have him to turn around and say, yeah, he's ready, or he should be the NXT champion. Again, I think it's very similar with the Jada Parker scenario in the sense where we're seeing this run and we want to see them do great and whatnot, but, you know, not necessarily propelling them right to the top. Put Javon Evans, put Javon Evans in a space where he's competing for the North American Championship. Then I'll be like, yeah, put it on him. Maybe depending on how we get there, the story, the opponent, blah, blah, blah. But at the same time, because it's the North American Championship, you're like, yeah, put it on him. No problem. I can do that. We can deal with that. That's fine. But the NXT Championship, I was like, let's just calm down a bit. Let's just slow it down a little bit. You know, let's step back a few steps. You still doing what you're doing. Still do your great stuff. I want to see it every week. I'm happy to see it every week. But, you know, in a way, you know, for me, it's like, you know, there's levels to this thing. There's steps to take before we get right to the top. And if you push someone to the top too early, you know, they come crumbling down. And I think we kind of said that very similar thing about the current NXT champion.
Potentially.
It would literally be a very similar scenario. for maybe different reasons, but the foundation of it all would be very similar. They weren't quite ready, propelled to the top maybe too quickly, and the fall is going to be a lot harder than if it happened in 2 or 3 years, maybe. You know what I mean? So we want to see.
On a side note, though, did you see Cedric?
Mm-hmm.
He lost his match. Promo afterwards. Something needs to change. Remember what I was saying, where I said I think the real story here is between Javon and Cedric.
Yeah.
I think it's en route.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
I like
very
it.
much, and I'm happy to see things like that. You know what I mean? Get him in that good space of being in the Iron Survivor match, but then let it further a different storyline away from the title, or him potentially, going after the title. So
Cedric might come and give him pointers on, oh, you lost, you didn't win, you should have done this, you should have done that. And John Von might say something disrespectful like, old man, you weren't even in the match.
Yeah.
And then it might, I'm happy they're using Cedric, because you can't have someone of that experience there while we're struggling with the men, and we're not using him. So for him to have that great match with Wesley and then seemingly have that promo afterwards where he said what he said at this point, let's see how it pans out.
For sure. And that whole conversation of, old man, you're not even in the match, could happen before the match.
Yeah, could do.
And then something else plays out in the match. So all sorts could happen. Our time is well fast spent. So let's end it here. Guys, you have been watching WrstlXtra on the WrestleManiac UK YouTube channel. Of course, don't forget to like and subscribe to see us every single week, and to also see this guy Mex put out all of his reactions to WWE, AEW, everything else in between, as well as his own exclusive interviews and other shows and everything else that this guy does too. You can also find Mex on the Wrestling's channel on YouTube also, as well as Gorilla Position as well. You can also find Mex on all the socials, WrestleManiac.uk on Instagram, WrestleManiac UK on X. Don't forget, you can find this guy, Gerard Bonner. Just say his name. He might just appear. But if not, you can find him on all things Bonafide, as well as his own show, The Faction Show, as well as WWT Live every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, as well as Gerard doing his commentary broadcasting for Arshay Wrestling, IWE, Turnbuckle Championship Wrestling, All Caribbean Wrestling, Southern Honor Wrestling, The Nightmare Factory, and I don't think I missed out anything amazing. You can find me in one place, the only place you need to find me, which is Black Wrestling Alliance on Instagram. Guys, thank you for joining us, and we will see you again next time.